Another one robbery's over there. Well, the other night I took the wife and kids out. I figured I'd play it safe. Left all lights on the apartment, left the radio on, left a note in the front door. The note said I'm inside. Came home that night, I still got robbed. The guy left his own note. He said, I looked all over for you.
Good morning. It is Wednesday, Wasden Wednesday, December the 13th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have Military Shorts, Bishop Barron, the 33 Strategies of War, and SEAL Team 6. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I shouldn't change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. And now, the military shorts.
A Spanish fighter jet almost started World War III when it tried to intercept a Russian plane. Let me explain. Flying over the neutral waters of the Baltic Sea, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu's plane was en route from Kaliningrad to Moscow after a ceremony. However, the flight quickly took a turn when a NATO F-18 Hornet fighter, belonging to the Spanish Air Force and part of Baltic air policing, attempted to shadow the minister's aircraft, flying dangerously close. In response, two fully armed Russian Su-27 flanker fighter jets tasked with escorting the minister's plane intervened. One of the Su-27s positioned itself strategically between the NATO F-18 and the minister's aircraft. He was ready to protect the Russian plane at all costs and wanted him to back off. The Spanish pilot of the F-18 had to make a quick decision. The F-18 suddenly moved away from the minister's plane, descending at full speed to create distance from the Su-27s. Luckily, the F-18 left the airspace.
The police just knocked on this family's door to help deliver the most heartwarming surprise to a little girl who was missing someone special for the holidays.
Hey, we got somebody who's apparently said they know you in the back of the car, and we need to see if you know them.
Apparently I just moved here, right? Yeah, he was trying to get into your other house that y'all just left. Okay, you got some shoes on?
So the little girl grabs her shoes to go see who is breaking into her old home, and when she finds out who it is, her reaction is incredible.
You know who that is?
That's Grandpa! That's my elf!
It was her beloved elf named Freckles, who she was worried wouldn't be able to find her new home. But thanks to the quick planning of Mom, they were able to preserve the magic for a little girl who was missing her holiday friend.
Are you excited?
We're glad we didn't have to take him in.
As soon as a jet lands on an aircraft carrier, the pilot must immediately push full throttle. If they don't, there could be disaster. But why is this? Unlike a typical runway, an aircraft carrier has very limited space for landing and takeoff. To bring a fast jet to a stop within this tight space, the aircraft carrier has arresting wires and tail hooks. These arresting wires are strong steel cables that go across the carrier's deck, while the tail hook is an attachment at the back of the jet, designed to catch one of these wires and stop the aircraft. However, this task is far from easy. The pilot must perform an almost perfect landing, hitting the wire at the right speed and angle. But things can go horribly wrong. Missing the wire or experiencing a wire failure can result in what's called a bolter. To avoid disaster, the pilot must be prepared to launch the jet again. So if the landing fails and the jet doesn't catch the wire, it needs to have enough speed and power to execute another takeoff and attempt a second landing.
Did you know the F-35 has a beast mode? While flying in stealth mode, the F-35 can carry up to 5,700 pounds of payload in its internal weapons bay. But when stealth isn't a priority and obliterating the enemy is, the F-35 has the aptly named Beast Mode, which allows it to carry up to 22,000 pounds of weapons, turning it into a bomb truck capable of raining destruction on enemy targets. When configured for air-to-air targets, an F-35 in Beast Mode carries 14 AMRAAMs and 2 AIM-9X Sidewinder missiles. For air-to-ground missions, it can hold 2 AMRAAMs, 6 JDAMs, and 2 Sidewinders. In fact, in this mode, the F-35 takes on so much extra payload that it has to take off from the back end of a carrier as opposed to the usual 350 feet. Of course, when heavily loaded, the F-35 increases its radar signature, which is why Beast Mode is reserved for combat environments where air superiority has already been achieved.
He quit high school at 16 to join the Merchant Marines and saw action in World War II, earning the Merchant Marine Combat Medal. When he returned home, he served in the National Guard before joining the Army, where he fought in the Korean War with the 5th Regimental Combat Team. He was Private James Bumgarner, and along the way he would earn 2 Purple Hearts for combat wounds, including shrapnel from a mortar explosion, while shielding the men in his platoon. But it was while on guard duty when he saved his unit thanks to his acute sense of smell. Picking up a scent of garlic, which he knew was a staple of the Chinese and North Koreans, he gave warning to his men. They were on the other side of the rise, and I passed word down the line, he would write in his memoir years later. We were ready for their ambush, stopped them cold in their tracks. The world would come to know him as James Garner, one of the great leading men of film and television in the 20th century, and a favorite among fans.
That's it! Fire!
This is from the movie Greyhound.
Target will be fine on our starboard bow! Fire as they bear! Air cover! Air cover! Right standard rudder! Open fire to mark the target for that aircraft! Open fire to mark target for that aircraft!
It's obvious that Putin has no respect for U.S. presidents, saying they are controlled by the deep state. However, he does have respect for one thing about the United States. Throughout history, Russia has been known as a land power, focused on winning battles through sheer numbers. But this means they lack a great navy to protect their coastlines. The U.S. has 13 aircraft carriers, capable of destroying entire nations. One U.S. aircraft carrier holds more power than Russia's entire air force. Russia struggles with just one barely functional aircraft carrier, while the U.S. has almost too many. But Russia's strategy means they don't need a big fleet of aircraft carriers or ships. They have a small strategic missile submarine force that carries the world's biggest nukes. The Russian Navy focuses on compact canals and smaller seas. Now this will blow your mind. Together, the U.S. Navy's fleet would come to 3.5 million tons, while the Russian Navy is much smaller. It would only be around 800,000 tons. Russia has always focused on defending its territorial waters. With a wingspan of 395 feet, the Stratolaunch Rock is easily the world's largest airplane. But what do you do with a plane that's wider than a football field? For Stratolaunch, the answer is clear. Test out new hypersonic technologies. The Rock was originally designed to airdrop rockets into space from 35,000 feet. But in 2019, it became a test platform for a whole new kind of technology, hypersonic vehicles. That's because with the U.S. military testing out new hypersonic missiles, hypersonic research and development is essential. And that's why on December 3rd, 2023, the Rock carried out the first captive carry test flight of the Talon A hypersonic test platform. You see, the Talon A will be able to reach speeds of Mach 6, but before undergoing a powered launch, its propulsion and telemetry systems had to be tested. So for 3 hours and 22 minutes, as the Stratolaunch Rock flew over the Mojave Desert, crucial information was collected that'll allow the military to better engage and defend against hypersonic threats.
He flew a staggering 44 missions as a bombardier on a B-25 over the Pacific during the Second World War. He was Second Lieutenant Russ Johnson of the 100th Bombardment Squadron, and on their 44th mission, they were tasked to bomb a Japanese airfield in the Philippines from only 500 feet for a third consecutive day. Japanese anti-aircraft guns pummeled the B-25. The co-pilot was killed, and the crew bailed into the sea off the coast of Zamboanga City, but not before they nailed the target. Johnson broke both ankles from the hard fall and tread water for 12 hours before being rescued. He earned a Purple Heart and Bronze Star that day to go along with a half-dozen other medals throughout the war. The world would come to know the lieutenant as Russell Johnson, the beloved professor on Gilligan's Island. He never spoke of his time in the war, recalled his co-star Dawn Wells. He was a bona fide war hero and never uttered a word.
Pentagon warned Congress last week that if they fail to give more security assistance to Ukraine, that it will very likely lead to U.S. troops on the ground in Europe. With the House Foreign Affairs chairman saying if Putin takes over Ukraine, he'll get Moldova, Georgia, then maybe the Baltics. And this is coming as the Republican Party is blocking a multi-billion-dollar package that would give security assistance to Ukraine, a move that's shaken U.S. allies. With America's top ally, the UK, sending their foreign secretary to the United States to tell them that they are giving Putin and Xi a Christmas present, and adding that American lives will be at risk if Putin isn't contained and that this is the greatest test for our generation. But follow to stay in the loop.
And that was the military shorts. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Bishop Robert Barron.
When you sit by yourself alone in a room, it means I got the time and the space to think about God, about the meaning of my life, about who I am and what I'm doing. The trouble, Pascal said a long time ago, was divertissement in his French, diversions or distractions. And, to be fair, he had a problem with this. He was somewhat addicted to gambling. But he knew that he was frittering a lot of his life away with idle distractions. So he felt most of us most of the time. And I think, that's not a bad way to examine your conscience at the end of the day, is to go back and say, okay, how much of my day was spent in kind of trivial stuff?
And that was Bishop Robert Barron. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, little Ronald Reagan.
If you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
When it came to communism, socialism, and other systems that denied people their basic human rights, President Reagan was unwavering. A devoted anti-communist, he was not afraid to say what needed to be said or do what needed to be done to bring freedom to people who were living under repressive regimes. Today marks the 36th anniversary of President Reagan so boldly standing at the Brandenburg Gate and declaring that Mikhail Gorbachev tear it down. The speech cards he used and the suit he wore during this historic visit are both on display within our permanent museum galleries.
And that was Ronald Reagan. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now we pick up where we left off on Chapter 3, Turmoil of Events. Do not lose your presence of mind, from the 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene.
From On War by Karl von Clausewitz. The senses make a more vivid impression on the mind than systematic thought. Even the man who planned the operation and now sees it being carried out may well lose confidence in his earlier judgment. War has a way of masking the stage with scenery crudely daubed with fearsome apparitions. Once this is cleared away, and the horizon becomes unobstructed, developments will confirm his earlier convictions. This is one of the great chasms between planning and execution. The detached Buddha tactic. Watching the movie director Alfred Hitchcock, 1899 to 1980, at work on a film set was often quite a surprise to those seeing it for the first time. Most filmmakers are wound-up balls of energy, yelling at the crew and barking out orders, but Hitchcock would sit in his chair, sometimes dozing, or at least with his eyes half closed. On the set of Strangers on a Train, made in 1951, the actor Farley Granger thought Hitchcock's behavior meant he was angry or upset, and asked him if anything was wrong. "Oh," Hitchcock replied sleepily, "I'm so bored." The crew's complaints and actors' tantrums, nothing fazed him. He would just yawn, shift in his chair, and ignore the problem. "Hitchcock didn't seem to direct us at all," said the actress Margaret Lockwood. "He was a dozing, nodding Buddha with an enigmatic smile on his face." It was hard for Hitchcock's colleagues to understand how a man doing such stressful work could stay so calm and detached. Some thought it was part of his character, that there was something inherently cold-blooded about him. Others thought it a gimmick, a put-on. Few suspected the truth. Before the filmmaking had even begun, Hitchcock would have prepared for it with such intense attention to detail that nothing could go wrong. He was completely in control. No temperamental actress, no panicky art director, no meddling producer could upset him or interfere with his plans. Feeling such absolute security in what he had set up, he could afford to lie back and fall asleep. Hitchcock's process began with a storyline, whether from a novel or an idea of his own. As if he had a movie projector in his head, he would begin to visualize the film. Next, he would start meeting with a writer who would soon realize that this job was unlike any other. Instead of taking some producer's half-baked idea and turning it into a screenplay, the writer was simply there to put on paper the dream trapped in Hitchcock's mind. He or she would add flesh and bones to the characters and would of course write the dialogue, but not much else. When Hitchcock sat down with the writer Samuel Taylor for the first script meeting on the movie Vertigo, 1958, his descriptions of several scenes were so vivid, so intense, that the experiences seemed almost to have been real, or maybe something he had dreamed. This completeness of vision foreclosed creative conflict. As Taylor soon realized, although he was writing the script, it would remain a Hitchcock creation. Once the screenplay was finished, Hitchcock would transform it into an elaborate shooting script. Blocking, camera positions, lighting, and set dimensions were spelled out in detailed notes. Most directors leave themselves some latitude, shooting scenes from several angles, for example, to give the film editor options to work with later on. Not Hitchcock. He essentially edited the entire film in the shooting script. He knew exactly what he wanted and wrote it down. If a producer or actor tried to add or change a scene, Hitchcock was outwardly pleasant. He could afford to pretend to listen. But inside, he was totally unmoved. Nothing was left to chance. For the building of the sets, quite elaborate in a movie like Rear Window, Hitchcock would present the production designer with precise blueprints, floor plans, incredibly detailed lists of props. He supervised every aspect of set construction. He was particularly attentive to the clothes of his leading actresses. According to Edith Head, costumer on many Hitchcock movies, including Dial M for Murder in 1954, there was a reason for every color, every style, and he was absolutely certain about everything he settled on. For one scene, he saw Grace Kelly in pale green, for another in white chiffon, for another in gold. He was really putting a dream together in the studio. When the actress Kim Novak refused to wear a gray suit in Vertigo because she felt it made her look washed out, Hitchcock told her he wanted her to look like a woman of mystery who had just stepped out of the San Francisco fog. How could she argue with that? She wore the suit. Hitchcock's actors found working with him strange yet pleasant. Some of Hollywood's best, Joseph Cotton, Grace Kelly, Cary Grant, Ingrid Bergman, said that he was the easiest director to work for. His nonchalance was catching, and since his films were so carefully staged as not to depend on the actor's performance in any particular scene, they could relax. Everything went like clockwork. As James Stewart told the cast of The Man Who Knew Too Much, 1956, "We're in the hands of an expert here. You can lean on him. Just do everything he tells you and the whole thing will be okay." As Hitchcock sat calmly on the set, apparently half asleep, the cast and crew could see only the small part each one played. They had no idea how everything fit into his vision. When Taylor saw Vertigo for the first time, it was like seeing another man's dream. The film neatly duplicated the vision Hitchcock had expressed to him many months before. Interpretation. The first film Hitchcock directed was The Pleasure Garden, a silent he made in 1925. The production went wrong in every conceivable way. Hitchcock hated chaos and disorder. Unexpected events, panicky crew members, and any loss of control made him miserable. From that point on, he decided, he would treat filmmaking like a military operation. He would give his producers, actors, and crew no room to mess up what he wanted to create. He taught himself every aspect of film production, set design, lighting, the technicalities of cameras and lenses, editing, sound. He ran every stage of the film's making. No shadow could fall between the planning and the execution. Establishing control in advance, the way Hitchcock did, might not seem like presence of mind, but it actually takes that quality to its zenith. It means entering battle, in Hitchcock's case a film shoot, feeling calm and ready. Setbacks may come, but you will have foreseen them and thought of alternatives, and you are ready to respond. Your mind will never go blank when it is that well prepared. When your colleagues barrage you with doubts, anxious questions, and slipshod ideas, you may nod and pretend to listen, but really you're ignoring them. You've outthought them in advance. And your relaxed manner will prove contagious to other people, making them easier to manage in turn. It is easy to be overwhelmed by everything that faces you in battle, where so many people are asking or telling you what to do. So many vital matters press in on you that you can lose sight of your goals and plans. Suddenly you can't see the forest for the trees. Understand, presence of mind is the ability to detach yourself from all that, to see the whole battlefield, the whole picture, with clarity. All great generals have this quality. And what gives you that mental distance is preparation, mastering the details beforehand. Let people think your Buddha-like detachment comes from some mysterious source. The less they understand you, the better. From a Letter to a General by Frederick the Great. For the love of God, pull yourself together and do not look at things so darkly. The first step backward makes a poor impression in the army. The second step is dangerous, and the third becomes fatal. Keys to Warfare. We humans like to see ourselves as rational creatures. We imagine that what separates us from animals is the ability to think and reason. But that is only partly true. What distinguishes us from animals just as much is our capacity to laugh, to cry, to feel a range of emotions. We are, in fact, emotional creatures as well as rational ones. And although we like to think we govern our actions through reason and thought, what most often dictates our behavior is the emotion we feel in the moment. We maintain the illusion that we are rational through the routine of our daily affairs, which helps us to keep things calm and apparently controlled. Our minds seem rather strong when we're following our routines.
And that was the next part of Chapter 3, Amidst the Turmoil of Events, from the 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Part 2 of Chapter 14 from SEAL Team 6, From the Ashes.
On the hospital bed, I floated up and looked down at myself lying there. I'm dying. This staph infection sucks a lot worse than combat. The next day, the doctor was visibly upset with me. If you're going to stay under my care, you've got to give us a way to stay in contact with you. If not, you need to go back to Virginia and let those Navy doctors take care of you. He was scared. The doctor had done me a favor by letting me rehab in his Army hospital, and I repaid him by almost dying on him. Yes, sir. They kept me in the hospital a couple of days until I recovered. Sitting at home in my wheelchair, I committed one of the team's gravest sins, feeling sorry for myself. I slipped deep into depression. After waking in the morning, I had to perform my pin care, cleaning the skin around the 4 big pins sticking out of my leg. If I didn't, the infection would crawl down the pins and into my bone, causing another staph infection like the one that almost killed me. Then I'd bandage everything back up. The whole process took 15 to 20 minutes, twice a day. Doing the pin care by myself was tough. I asked my wife and brother-in-law to help, but they didn't have the stomach. It looked terrible. There's nothing normal about 4 pins screwed into a bone. My skin graft looked nasty, the meat visible. The walls were closing in on me. I wasn't accustomed to being trapped indoors, and my depression was bearing down on me. I had to get out of the house, so I decided to do something simple and routine. But even something as mundane as grocery shopping turned out to be a bigger blow to my weakened self-esteem. One day, while slowly wheeling myself down the aisle in a Winn-Dixie supermarket in Jessup, Georgia, I started to realize how good it felt to be out of the house, contributing to the family by shopping. Some return to a normal life. An overweight woman with a chicken hairdo, short in the back and spiky on top, the Kate Gosselin haircut that is common in Wayne County, stared at my leg. Her face twisted like she'd eaten a lemon. I'd cut the right leg of my sweatpants off above the knee to accommodate my external fixator. Although the skin-grafted area was bandaged, the pins were visible. "Why don't you stay at home?" she said. "Don't you realize how gross that is?" I got my leg shot off serving her country, our country. Maybe this is how ordinary Americans see me. Are they fine with us going off to die for them, but don't want to see us wounded? I was feeling too sorry for myself to realize that she didn't know who I was or how I was wounded. At the time, when my spirit lay in the dirt, her words kicked me in the teeth. I desperately needed to bounce back, but I couldn't. Those words punted me deeper into depression. At home, I wheeled around the house in my chair, eating and killing time watching TV. I couldn't take a shower or a bath because I couldn't get my screws wet. I had to wash my hair in the sink and take a washcloth bath. Every other day, I did rehabilitation at the hospital in Fort Stewart. They gave me hot whirlpool treatments for my left foot to shake loose the dead flesh. It hurt like getting shot again. They gave me crutches. They put me on bars to help me walk. The pain was so intense that I couldn't stop tears from coming out of my eyes. I'd been still for too long before the rehabilitation. Then I had to have another surgery. Later, I would have 3 more. My internal clock hadn't adjusted from Africa to Germany, then back to the United States. With time on my hands, it became easy to take a 2 or 3 hour nap, which kept me awake at night. Pain and depression didn't help matters either. Bone pain. As long as those screws stayed in my leg, I'd have pain. It's understandable how people can become addicted to pain pills, but I despised the pills. They just made me numb. To some small degree, I wanted to feel pain. Guilty that I had survived while a lot of good guys, special ones like Dan Bush, lay dead. I thought maybe I was strange for feeling this way. Suck it up. Take the pain. Out of the SEAL Team 6 loop and with no team guys around, I suffered the withdrawal symptoms of being cut off from the camaraderie. I was in culture shock, too. People around town could talk to me about their lives, but I couldn't talk to them about mine. I couldn't joke with them about my Hell Week death leap to kill a rack of trays that I thought was a deer, or laugh with them about the hospital in Germany where I gave the ranger buddy my painkiller injections. People around town didn't understand. I learned to shut up about those experiences. Now it occurred to me how different I had become from most people. Away from my teammates, I felt forgotten too. With no real-world missions, I had gone cold turkey from adrenaline. Now, I couldn't even walk. In the SEAL culture, where it pays to be a winner, I was the biggest loser. I was angry at the world in general and at God in particular. Why did this have to happen to me? In retrospect, I see that God was letting me know I was only human and that being a SEAL was just a job. Howard, you were too hard-headed to listen to me after you were shot once. You didn't listen to me after the second shot. Here, big boy, let me give you your 3rd bullet hole. Now do I have your attention? You are not Superman. You are God's gift to special operations only for as long as I allow it to be. You are where you are because of me, not because of you. This is my way of getting your attention. Now that I've got it, let me mold you further. You are not the finished product. He humbled me and brought me back down to earth, made me become a father to my children. At the time, no one could have convinced me of all that, but looking back, getting shot in the leg was the best thing that ever happened to me. One day, a buddy of mine called me. On his ranch, he had a special hybrid of deer that he bred with American white-tailed deer. Come over and let's hunt a little. Yes. Let me get out of this house. Anything. He picked me up in his pickup truck, took me out to the field, and set me down in my wheelchair on the ground. He pushed me nearly 30 yards through light underbrush, then stopped. He pointed to a spot about 150 yards away. Over there is where the deer usually come out. My personal hunting rifle was a 7mm Magnum with a nice scope. I was so happy, waiting there for nearly an hour and a half. A huge buck came out. Sitting in my wheelchair, I brought my rifle to my shoulder, pulled the trigger, and the deer went down. Perfect shot. After laying my rifle on the ground, I wheeled my chair over to the animal. Pushing my wheelchair along a dirt road took me a while. I parked my chair next to the deer. The beautiful buck looked up at me. It snorted, then laid its head back down. It made a last gasp, as if all the air had been sucked out of its lungs. Hearing it die, I thought, I'd have been just as happy to come out and watch you instead of taking your life. I've seen enough things die. I took the buck and had the head mounted. In South Georgia, hunting is big. The boys head out before the crack of dawn and sit in their tree stands waiting for their prey during the season. I was still willing to kill someone to save myself or save another person, willing to kill in the line of duty. But I never hunted again. The rehab people treated me like a celebrity. At that time, I was the only combat wounded veteran in their hospital. Every time I went in, 5 or 10 people would show up to talk to me. After 6 or 7 weeks, my niece brought me a device that slipped over the pins in my leg, creating a rubber seal, so I could shower. I stood on one leg in the shower and lathered up my hair. It felt like the best gift I'd ever received. In early December, 2 months after the longest day in my life, my hometown of Screven, Georgia, threw me a hero's welcome as part of the Christmas parade with yellow ribbons everywhere. A big sign in the restaurant covered the front window, "Welcome back, Howard, the hometown hero." Nearly all 900 of the townspeople must have signed it. People from Wayne County came out to line the streets, see me, and wish me well. They had no idea about the physical pain, the mental anguish, the loss, or the dark hole of depression that tormented me before they honored me that way. They had no idea how much their welcome meant to me, appreciating me as part of the community. I didn't feel like such a loser. Mike Durant, the pilot of Super 6-4, the second Black Hawk to crash in Mogadishu, had broken his leg and back. Aidid's propaganda minister, Abdullahi Firimbi Hassan, held him prisoner for 11 days until Mike and a captured Nigerian soldier were driven by their captors to a checkpoint at the UN compound. One of Durant's captors pulled out UN credentials hanging on a chain around his neck and showed them to the guard. They waved him in. The checkpoint guard didn't even realize Mike sat in the car. Nobody knew until he was already on the runway. His captors turned him over to the Red Cross. The United Nations showed enough unity with the enemy, but I didn't feel like they showed enough unity with us. I never felt they could be trusted for operational security. You can only trust the people you train and fight with. I had trained with foreign counterterrorism units, and I trusted them. The UN checkpoint guard's coziness with Durant's captor and the fact that his captor carried UN credentials confirmed my distrust for the UN. Mike Durant and I had just gotten to where we could walk unassisted. Our first meeting since Somalia was at Fairchild Air Force Base in Spokane, Washington, to learn advanced survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. Although SEER schools like the one at the Naval Air Station in Brunswick, Maine, simulated being hunted, imprisoned, and tortured, this school took place in a classroom with 10 to 12 students, mainly learning the psychological aspects of captivity. With our experience in Mogadishu, Mike and I quickly became guest speakers for that particular class. The instructors called us to the front of the room where we talked about our experiences and fielded questions from students and instructors. The Navy flew Casanova, Little Big Man, Sourpuss, Captain Olson, and me to the Pentagon to award us the Silver Star. In Mogadishu, Captain Olson left headquarters to participate in rescuing men still pinned down. At our awards ceremony, video cameras rolled and still cameras flashed. My citation read, "The President of the United States takes pleasure in presenting the Silver Star Medal to Hull Maintenance Technician First Class Howard E. Wasden, United States Navy, for service set forth in the following citation. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against a hostile force during Operation UNISOM II in Mogadishu, Somalia, on 3rd and 4th October 1993. Petty Officer Wasden was the member of a security team in support of an assault force that conducted an air assault raid into an enemy compound and successfully apprehended 2 key militia officials and 22 others. Upon receiving enemy small arms fire from numerous alleys, Petty Officer Wasden took up a firing position and returned fire. As he assaulted down the alley with members of his unit, he was wounded in the calf. Upon receiving combat field condition medical attention, he resumed his duties and continued to suppress enemy fire. As his convoy exfiltrated the area with detainees, his element came under withering enemy fire. Petty Officer Wasden, along with the security team, stopped to suppress enemy fire which had pinned down the Ranger blocking force. Although twice wounded, he continued to pull security and engage a superior enemy force from his vehicle. Later, while attempting to suppress enemy fire during an attempted link-up for evacuation of the helicopter crash site, Petty Officer Wasden was wounded a third time. His gallant efforts inspired his team members as well as the entire force. By his superb initiative, courageous action, and complete dedication to duty, Petty Officer Wasden reflected great credit upon himself and upheld the highest tradition of the United States Naval Force. It was signed for the President by John Dalton, the new Secretary of the Navy. Casanova and I walked into the Secretary of Defense's office and shook his hand. Upon exiting, Casanova said, "That man's got the softest hands I've ever felt." Later, I also received a whack on the PP for disobeying a direct order and helping the teenage Somali boy who'd stepped on a landmine, my most successful op in Somalia. Casanova and I sat chewing Copenhagen dip in Red Team's ready room. It was a huge informal room, mostly neutral in color. Mission briefs, real-world intel, and other briefings were done in a special room. Pictures of Red Team exploits decorated one wall. An ornate totem pole and an authentic Indian headdress stood as team symbols. In the largest part of the room were 4 big tables with 8 to 10 chairs that could sit a boat crew at each table. Carpeting covered the floor. The FNGs were responsible for cleanliness and keeping the 2 refrigerators stocked with various brands of beer. The team chief and team leader shared one office adjoining the team room. Also adjoining the team room was a computer room for general use. Just outside the team room were the individual cages where we kept our gear. Casanova and I sat at a table. Little Big Man arrived with an envelope from the Randall Knife Company. He had offered to send his knife, tell his story, and sponsor their company. SEAL Team 6 sniper saved by Randall Knife. "How much are they going to pay you?" Casanova asked. Little Big Man opened the letter and read, "Thank you for sharing your story with us. We'll give you 10% off if you want to buy another knife." "Dumbasses," Little Big Man said. Casanova laughed loudly and boisterously. I laughed so hard I almost swallowed my chewing tobacco. I recovered rapidly and returned to the team. My first contact with Lieutenant Commander Buttwipe was when he took over command of Red Team as senior officer, Red Team leader. Buttwipe lived for appearances more than getting the job done, which ruffled a lot of operators' feathers. A number of people left Red Team to go to blue and gold teams because of him. He had a fake chuckle, especially in the presence of senior officers. When he laughed with us, it felt like he was really thinking about something else. Because he was part Japanese, we made jokes behind his back about losing World War II. Short in stature, he cut his hair short too, in a flat-top style. He must have loved the smell of my gluteus maximus because he rode it constantly. Maybe Buttwipe felt self-conscious that he lacked talent. Although he ran and swam well, he brought up the rear during CQB shooting drills, and he lacked good, timely tactical decisions. Maybe he resented never seeing combat or not earning a Silver Star. Regardless of his reason, somehow, Buttwipe found out that Delta wanted me. The Delta operators at the hospital in Germany encouraged me to join them. A Delta colonel told me at the Andrews Air Force Base Hospital how I could laterally transfer out of the SEALs and into Delta. In retrospect, Delta probably would have understood and respected me more. I know of no stronger bond than the bond with people I'd been in combat with. My relationship with Casanova, Little Big Man, the Delta operators, the CCTs, and the PJs was stronger than my relationship with other teammates. "I'll support you if you stay here," Buttwipe said, "but if you try to leave, I'll be your worst nightmare." Buttwipe's actions gave me more motivation to transfer to Delta. Yet his words said he didn't want me to leave. He made no sense. I remained because I trained to be a SEAL, was still a SEAL, and wanted to continue being a SEAL. It's what I did best. In the sum of things, Buttwipe didn't support me. He even gave me a hard time about showing up at the Delta Memorial unshaven in civilian clothes. I really couldn't understand his argument. I'd almost died of staph infection while making the trip to the ceremony. Surviving day to day took nearly all the energy I had. Shaving was a luxury I couldn't afford. I despised his incompetence as much as I despised the incompetence of Clinton. Buttwipe should have been a politician instead of an operator. Just remembering him now makes me want to kick him in the face. Laura and I divorced. The baby she was pregnant with wasn't mine. Wasn't even the same race. It happened while I was gone. That's all I'm going to say about that. I'd been unfaithful too. Rachel and Blake went to live with their mom because I wouldn't be able to take care of them when I had to be away for work. I hadn't spent enough time with Rachel, and now I'd be spending even less time with her. Her mother let her do most of the things she wanted, but I didn't. When Rachel became old enough to choose, she chose to live with her mom. Later, when Rachel was a senior in high school, her mother let her move in with her boyfriend, something I would never allow. My relationship with Rachel would deteriorate. Even though I was stricter with Blake than with Rachel, he chose to live with me when he turned 13. Although I should have known that family ties are stronger than job ties, I'd sacrificed my family for the teams. In spite of my sacrifices for the teams, I could never return to being 100% of the sniper I used to be. My thinking became darker. One day I held my Sig Sauer P226 pistol in my hand. How bad would it be if I took this P226 and ended everything with one 9mm bullet? There are worse things than death. I convinced myself that everyone would be better off. They could collect on my life insurance. Blake was visiting me. Dad? That one word snapped me out of it. Ending my life would have been selfish. If I don't have anything else to live for, at least I have my children. I never had those dark thoughts again. Although it had looked initially like I'd lose my leg, I didn't. I walked on crutches before I was supposed to, used a cane before I was supposed to, walked unassisted before I was supposed to, and started swimming before I was supposed to. Although people thought I would never walk without a limp, I did. Even though many thought I'd never run again, I did. After returning to the team, I hit the gym every morning and did PT with them. I couldn't always keep up, but I consistently worked hard at it.
And that was the end of Chapter 14, From the Ashes, from SEAL Team 6 by Howard Wasden. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States. Today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you to be honest, smart, and beautiful, and remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.